You know, when you start researching a specific type of dog, you eventually hit that one page, the health page.
Oh, yeah. Everybody knows that page. It's unavoidable.
Right. You're just trying to figure out if a breed, like, say, the German Shepherd, is right for you. And suddenly you're staring down this terrifying list of multisyllabic diseases.
It is definitely overwhelming.
It really is. I mean, it feels less like a pet guide and more like a crystal ball of impending doom.
Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
But the mission of this deep dive today is to totally shift that mindset. What if looking at that list isn't a guarantee of heartbreak, but is actually your biggest superpower as a caretaker?
I love that. And that is the exact mindset shift we need to make today. Because if you just stare at the raw veterinary data, well, it reads like an intimidating medical dictionary.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's the kind of thing that can easily scare you away from what could otherwise be a phenomenal relationship with a dog.
Right, which would be a shame.
Exactly. So our goal today is to synthesize these diverse medical terms into a practical, empowering toolkit. We really have to separate the facts of genetics from just, the fear of the unknown.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we dive into the anatomy and start throwing around clinical terms, we first have to understand how to even look at this data.
Yes, the framing is everything.
Right, and the source material emphasizes one specific word above all others, and we really need to decode it before we go any further. That word is predisposition.
That is the foundational concept here. When the veterinary literature states that a breed is predisposed to something, they are defining a very specific statistical reality.
Okay, what does that actually mean in plain English?
It simply means a condition tends to occur more frequently in that specific breed compared to dogs in general.
So just higher odds.
Exactly. And this happens due to a combination of their genetics, their specific body structure, or other inherited factors.
Wait, because if a breed is predisposed to something, my brain immediately translates that to, this dog is definitely going to get this disease. Are we basically just waiting for the other shoe to drop?
Not at all. And that's where the fear is entirely misplaced. An elevated risk absolutely does not mean every single German Shepherd is going to get sick.
Okay, that's a huge relief.
It is. Predisposition is a measure of statistical likelihood for the breed as a whole. It is not a crystal ball for the individual dog sitting in your living room.
So think of it like knowing your family has a certain tendency towards something, right? Like maybe a history of high blood pressure.
Yes, that's a great way to look at it.
Because having that knowledge doesn't guarantee it happens to you, but it means it's worth paying extra attention to your diet or getting checked more often.
That is a perfect parallel. Having that family history isn't a curse, it's a map.
Right.
A map.
It's genuinely useful information. This knowledge turns you from a passive owner who just crosses their fingers into an active protector. You know exactly where the potential vulnerabilities are, which means you know exactly where to stand guard.
Precisely.
Okay, so with that map in hand, let's look at the actual physical terrain of the German Shepherd. We know genetics load the dice, but how does the physical structure of this dog actually play out?
Well, we have to transition from the abstract idea of genetics to the literal bones of the German Shepherd. And the first thing most people think of is hip dysplasia.
Right, that's like the most well-known condition for the breed.
Yeah.
And looking at the sources, hip dysplasia fundamentally comes down to how the hip joint develops as a puppy grows.
Correct. It involves the physical fit and the movement of the ball and socket of that joint. The hip is basically a ball and socket mechanism, much like your own shoulder.
Okay.
So in dogs that are predisposed to dysplasia, the genetic blueprint dictates that the physical fit of the ball within the socket is just less than ideal.
So it's like a poorly fitted trailer hitch. If there's too much play in the mechanism, it just rattles and grinds every time you hit a bump.
That is exactly what happens. The movement isn't smooth, and a less than ideal fit affects joint comfort and mobility over time.
Ouch.
Yeah, the body tries to stabilize this loose joint, which causes abnormal wear. And it's not just the hips, by the way. Elbow dysplasia follows a very similar concept.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it just involves the complex interlocking bones of the elbow joints developing and fitting together poorly during growth.
So what does this all mean for the daily routine? If a dog is genetically predisposed to this poorly fitted joint, does keeping them skinny actually change the outcome, or is it just a drop in the bucket?
What's fascinating here is the sheer physics of it. The genetics might dictate the shape of the joint, but you dictate the load that joint has to carry.
Ah, okay. I see where this is going.
Both of these conditions are influenced by genetics, sure, but they are heavily impacted by growth rate and body condition during puppyhood development.
So the controllable variables are huge.
Massive. The expert consensus connects this directly to the broader risk of obesity. Maintaining a healthy body condition isn't an aesthetic or cosmetic goal.
Right, you aren't trying to make your dog look good for an Instagram photo.
Exactly. It is one of the most impactful, controllable factors an owner has. Excess weight drastically increases the strain on joints that are already facing structural challenges.
Which means the common temptation to overfeed a large breed puppy to help them bulk up is actually a terrible idea.
It is the absolute opposite of responsible feeding. You want to avoid excessive strain at all costs while they are developing.
That makes total sense. So we've covered the structural exterior and how diet impacts weight on the joints. Now let's look at what happens inside the digestive system itself.
Yes, because the German Shepherd's unique anatomy presents some other very specific risks.
Right. And moving into the internal mechanics, there are two primary conditions here. Let's start with gastric dilatation-volvulus,
Also known as bloat.
which, I won't lie, reading about this one is absolutely terrifying.
It is a very serious, acute emergency. To understand why it happens, you have to picture the anatomy. Large breeds like the German Shepherd are what we call deep-chested.
Right? Their ribcage drops down quite low.
Exactly. They are highly predisposed compared to other body types. The deep chest creates a physical void, and the stomach is suspended in there.
Almost like a hammock.
Yes, like a hammock. And in a worst-case scenario, the stomach fills with gas, that's the dilatation part, and it potentially twists, that is the volvulus.
So it's like twisting a balloon right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
The gas is trapped, pressure builds up, and it's a sudden catastrophic emergency.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. It cuts off blood supply and requires immediate surgical intervention.
Unbelievably scary. But then, on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, the sources point to something called Exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI.
Right. If bloat is a sudden structural emergency, EPI is a quiet, chronic mechanical failure.
Okay, what's failing here?
The pancreas. In a healthy dog, the pancreas produces digestive enzymes. But with EPI, the pancreas fails to produce adequate enzymes, which hinders the dog from absorbing nutrients from their food.
So if EPI is like a car engine running but not actually burning any of the fuel you put in, bloat is like the engine suddenly overheating in a sudden catastrophic emergency.
That is a brilliant analogy, yes. With EPI, the food goes in, but they can't break it down. They are quite literally starving on a cellular level, even if they are eating a ton.
But the takeaway for the listener here isn't to start panicking every time their dog eats, right?
Absolutely not. We aren't creating a diagnostic checklist for you to memorize.
Okay, good.
The goal is simply to recognize persistent changes in appetite or body condition despite normal feeding. That would be your cue for EPI.
And for bloat.
For bloat, the takeaway is to have a vet walk you through risk reduction for deep-chested dogs. Things like not exercising heavily right after a huge meal.
Okay, that feels much more manageable. So we've explored structural growth and daily internal mechanics. Now we trace the timeline forward to look at conditions that tend to reveal themselves later in a dog's life.
Yes, as a dog ages, the wear and tear of life combined with their genetic blueprint really starts to show. And one of the most studied neurological conditions in the breed is degenerative myelopathy.
Or DM. The forces describe this as a condition involving the spinal cord that affects coordination and mobility.
Yes. Think of the spinal cord as a complex fiber optic cable. In dogs with DM, the insulation around that cable slowly degrades.
So the signals from the brain to the hind legs just get lost along the wire.
Precisely. It shows up later in life. And German Shepherds are closely studied for this due to an identified genetic marker in the breed.
Wait, let's bring it back to our earlier point about predisposition. Having that genetic marker means an increased risk, not a guaranteed outcome, right?
That is a vital distinction to maintain, yes. It
Yeah.
means elevated risk, not a certainty.
Okay, good. And alongside DM, as we look at older dogs, we have to talk about arthritis and joint degeneration.
Which connects directly back to the dysplasia and the weight topics we covered earlier.
Because it's all connected.
Entirely. Wear and tear over time, whether from early developmental factors or just aging and activity, leads to the breakdown of cartilage. And that leads to stiffness and discomfort.
Now, there's one more condition the sources flag, and I just want to mention it briefly. Perianal fistulas.
Yes, I'll briefly flag this as well. It's another breed-associated condition involving the skin and tissue in the perianal area.
Right.
It's an immune-mediated issue, and we just want you to be able to recognize the term if a vet brings it up.
Got it. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Looking at all these completely different issues, spine, joints, digestion, skin, The common thread here is that none of these conditions should be self-diagnosed.
No, definitely not. You don't need to be a vet.
The key is looking for patterns, right?
Exactly. The critical word from all the sources is persistent.
Persistent, not just a one-off event.
Right. Every dog has an off day. They might play too hard and limp a bit. What you are looking for are changes in mobility, coordination, or energy that do not resolve on their own.
So like a sudden reluctance to climb stairs that lasts for days.
Yes. If it's persistent, that is your trigger to act.
Which brings us perfectly to the final piece of the puzzle. We've laid out the map of potential health hurdles. Now, how do you navigate this map safely?
This is where we transition to the concrete actions that make a difference, the proactive toolkit.
Yes, the things you can actually do. And looking at the sources, the first major tool is responsible breeding.
It is the most effective tool for reducing hereditary conditions. Reputable breeders use health screening on breeding dogs for hip and elbow health.
They literally take x-rays to ensure structural soundness.
I do.
Yeah.
And they run DNA tests for genetic markers for conditions like degenerative myelopathy.
I have to reflect on this for a second because I feel like a lot of people worry that asking a breeder about health screening is being like annoying or demanding.
Oh, I hear that all the time, but you have to push past that. Asking a breeder about health screening isn't being annoying. It's a genuinely reasonable, important question.
Because it shapes the dog's entire future.
Exactly. It is the most important conversation you can have with a breeder.
And what about for dogs that are already in our homes?
For them, your primary tool is the veterinary partnership. Regular checkups are key.
So not just going when there's a blatant emergency.
Right. Vets can track health over time. They catch subtle changes early, and they guide age-appropriate screening based on your dog's specific history.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the through line of the entire source material is that awareness isn't about living in fear.
It's just having the map.
Exactly. Treating persistent changes as a signal to call a professional is the best way to protect your dog's quality of life.
I love that. You have the map, so you don't have to be afraid of the dark. Let's briefly recap the journey we've taken today. We unpacked the true meaning of predisposition.
Right, learning that it's a warning sign, not a death sentence.
We explored how structure and anatomy like deep chests and ball and socket joints drive specific risks.
And we learned why weight management is so critical.
Yep. And noticing persistent changes is your best daily defense. But before we wrap up, I know you have one final provocative thought for everyone to mull over. Lay it on me.
I do. The sources emphasize how genetic screening is successfully reducing the prevalence of these hereditary conditions over time, right?
Right. Science is actually fixing the problems.
But think about this. Human choices in selective breeding originally caused these predispositions by favoring certain aesthetic traits.
Oh, wow. Like the sloping back or the deep chest.
Exactly. So if human choices cause these predispositions, consider how our newfound focus on genetic markers and structural health might physically reshape the very blueprint of the German Shepherd over the next few decades.
Wait, so by prioritizing internal health over like a specific look?
Are we currently witnessing the real-time evolution of the breed? The dog of 50 years from now might be fundamentally different simply because we changed our priorities.
That is an incredible thing to think about. We're literally watching a breed evolve in real time. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
We hope this exploration helps shift that intimidating medical dictionary into an empowering toolkit. Stay curious, stay proactive, and keep asking the right questions. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.